We are live. Okay. Welcome back to IP City. Hello, guys. This is our space to talk to builders and thinkers pushing the frontier of governance for the internet, for the AI, for the crypto era. Before introducing our special guest, a quick reminder. We are actually 1 month away from kicking off IP Village, which is Brazil's largest pop-up city, on the beautiful island of Florianopolis, here in the south of Brazil. We are bringing hundreds of global builders and techno-optimists together to build, to prototype tools and services for an agentic city running on chain. So we are using a lot of hyped words. We will host 3 hacker houses, open for residents to work, to prototype, and run workshops and many other activities in that specific teams. 1 AI house, 1 on-chain house, and another very important privacy house. And this is one of the topics that we are going to discuss today. So if you want to get immersed in and help shape the future of cities by building it, you should join us. I will put the link in a moment. So yeah, Michel Bauwens, our special guest, is the legendary founder of the Peer-to-Peer Foundation and a leading theorist of the commons and peer-to-peer governance. Studying how open networks, cooperatives, decentralized communities can organize, let's say, productions and institutions beyond the traditional state and market model. So welcome, Michel Bauwens.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Cool. Hi, Casta. Hi, Andre. How are you doing, guys?
Casta, we can't hear you.
I'm mute, sorry. So good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm especially excited because I'm a huge fan of Michel. Already know him from a long time. Of course, you do a lot of stuff, Michel, but I think 2 years ago you reposted a project of mine, which is about which was Velocracy. It was a project about building on-chain decentralized governance. So I really appreciate that you took the time to take a look at it and repost it. But I already knew before that, and I was always a huge fan. So I have lots of questions that I'm very, very eager to ask you. So happy to be here with you all, guys.
And my name is Andre. I am co-founder together with Casta of Weaver, which is a company that does education, communities for Web3. Velocracy is our governance product as well. So we try to push Velocracy and bring it to the real world. And I'm also really happy for us to have this conversation today.
Cool. So, Michel, how did you end up working with networks and decentralized governance? Tell us a bit of your story.
Well, I was actually, I feel I was a bit late, but still compared to a lot of people, I was early. I discovered the internet in 1990. At the time, I was working for British Petroleum as a knowledge manager. I was actually working, just under the top of the agribusiness. Nobody knows that BP was making food, but it was 25,000 people. And we used CompuServe before the internet. So I was already aware of this kind of capacity to, put brains in sync in real time. And I was already like, wow, this is new. This is going to change how society works. This cannot have no effect, because we've never been able to do this. And then, of course, when the internet came, then I saw, well, okay, this can only be used so far by very well-funded multinationals, but now this is gonna bleed out in the whole society, right? So this is gonna be something. And so I was maybe the person who in Belgium, in my home country, I trained the first generation of internet entrepreneurs, and I created 2 internet startups myself in the 90s. And my first one did well. I sold it to Alcatel. The second one, kind of crashed with the internet crash of 2000s. And so then I worked for the telco on digital scenarios and stuff. So I was, really fully in this kind of digital culture and business thing by that time. And I had seen that this P2P stuff was popping up everywhere. Like it was a new form, like the Zapatistas, for example. I already saw this in 95. The Zapatistas, they were like a small rebel army in Chiapas. The Mexican army could have wiped them out after a few months, probably. But because they had this worldwide support network, digital support network, the PR cost of doing that would have been, it wasn't possible, right? And so they survived because they had these peer-to-peer networks. And then you had Seattle, like a global mobilization, but many other things. So you could see that this kind of form of organizing was becoming, more and more a general thing, right? And I guess the commons that came maybe a bit later, but basically when I discovered free software, open hardware, and then I got interested in studying the history of it, and then I said, oh wow, this is actually not a new thing; it's a new form of an old thing, right? And so and I have always been somebody interested in like the macro stuff. Like this is just how my brain works, so when I see something, I always want to kind of, find out what the context is and how it evolved in time. And, as the older you get, the more you can read and study, I guess, so you do have some advantages. Maybe you remember a few less things and names and stuff when you get older, but sometimes it also helps you to get like, the underlying structures and threads. And life is a string of defeats. Haha. So when you're 30, you think everything is easy, you're gonna change the world. By the time as you get older, you see how more difficult it is. You have all these unintended consequences and counter forces, and action creates reaction. Anyway, so I guess that's where I am. So maybe with a bit of more wisdom, as you and hopefully not too rigid, because of course that's another dark side of getting older. That some people get rigid in their brains. So that's kind of the story. I also, to be honest, I was a very radical lefty for a long time. So I believe in human emancipation. Of course, I also know that it gets wrong a lot, that big dreams would lead to big disasters. And you might find it surprising, but I think in a way, Web3 is an emancipation, is an attempt today to do the same, right? So if you look at history, the world religions was the first attempt for people to civilize civilization, to make sure that the warriors wouldn't rape their own people. And if you read, certainly Christianity, it's all about, loving your neighbor, harmony. And, you look at Taoism, Buddhism, these are very high values of having a better world. Hard to achieve, but the thing, the desire is there. And I think the second expression of this was socialism, anarchism, liberalism, these mass ideologies in a different type of society becoming secular. So now, we're going to take power and then we're going to change everything according, new values. And I think now it's constructive networks, right? So I think Web3 is a new attempt by humanity to to live, lives that we want. And I think this is the problem with civilization. We are genetically and anthropologically primed for convivial relationships, right? That's why we had kinship-based societies for so long, because that's what we want. And these are people we normally naturally trust. And then as we get into civilization, we get classes, we get domination, we get alienation. We are together in these big cities with 30 million people. We don't know our neighbors. So this is always coming back, And there is a Japanese guy, Kojin Karatani. He calls it mode D. So mode A, kinship, mode B, the state, mode C, the market. And mode D is the permanent attempt by humanity to recreate mode A at a higher level of complexity, right? Because we want to have a better life, but we don't want to die when we're 30, right? So it's not like we want to abolish civilization either. We want to keep the advantages and the knowledge and the technology, but we would not like to pay the price that we often have to pay to get that. So that's kind of, and will we ever get there? I don't know, but I think the counter movements are necessary for balance. So there is also this author Hansi Freinacht, who wrote The Listening Society and some other books. There's actually two people. It's a pseudonym. I think his name is Daniel Gortz. So he talks about the coordination engine and the purification engine. So the invention of a new mode of extraction, like hunter-gathering, agriculture and mining, industry, cognitive, is a very harsh process in the beginning. For example, agriculture wipes out tribes. Industry wipes out the peasants. AI may well wipe out a lot of, intellectual workers on top of physical workers. And so that creates a reaction, which is we can't just sacrifice people like that. We have to do it in a way that is human, right? And so then you get what he calls a purification engine, would be the world religions, the social movements, and now I think the constructive networks. So that's kind of the way I see it, as a it's a permanent kind of tension, between how we extract value and how we maintain a society that is livable by doing that.
Yep. Let's go deeper on this topic. So if I understood, your framework is there is the market, there is the state, and there is the commons, and they interconnect with each other. What is the role of each one? Like, so what is market is good? What is the shortcuts of markets, and so on and so forth? So
So let me give you just a bit of history of the commons. So indigenous people, they have spiritual commons. Like, this mountain is protected by a god or a spirit. We can't touch it too much because then the god is going to get angry, right? And so they have this kind of more easy ability to live in harmony with their natural environment. I mean, they actually also do destroy it, but over much longer term than we can. So then you have class societies, you have empires and monarchies and feudalism and all of that, right? And they actually respect the commons. So in every society, whether it's the Ottoman Empire or the medieval Christianity, there are commons. And they like the welfare system of an agrarian society, because you have to give half of more to your lord for protection. But they also always have these communal organizations, to survive bad harvests. It really helps for local people to maintain a balance. And so, for example, I was at Ipêcast last year, and so we looked at Ottoman commons. So the Ottomans, they were religious. It was a religious empire. They believed in jihad, conquering for Islam. So these were very motivated soldiers. But as soon as they had conquered, they would send the dervish brotherhoods and the Aki guilds to restart a livable society in the land that they had conquered. So you can see that there was a balance, let's put it that way. But of course, the dominant feature was the conquering state, right? So then we get market-based societies, and this is really the first time the commons get like really repressed, because the whole idea of the merchant class is that you have to have private property, otherwise it doesn't work. So you get the enclosures. Basically the land is divided. Fences, that's where the word enclosure comes from. And then you create absolute property instead of feudal property. So if you're a lord, you have your serfs are your children. You have to take care of them, right? Once you own the land, it's a commodity. If I can make more money selling it, I'll chase away the people, and I'll put sheep in the place. That's how capitalism works, right? So that was like really anti-commons. But what happened, this is my interpretation, is that as the farmers had to move to the city as workers, they created social commons, like unions, fraternities, health insurances. So what we call the welfare state was not an invention of the state. It was really generalizing, this activity of working class people and making it as a kind of like a state-based system instead. But originally there were social commons, and then we forgot about it. Like the commons became totally marginal. Nobody was talking about it, except then came the internet. And the internet, what it did was showing that intellectual cooperation was very powerful and very possible. So suddenly a lot of people said, oh, wow, we can create these Wikipedias, and software is better if we do open source rather than private, and we can do the open designs. And so that's how the commons actually came back in society. And then I would say in 2008, it was a big crisis, like in Europe, like in Spain, Portugal, at 50% unemployment in young people, for like 2-3 years in a row. And so this digitized generation then started saying, oh, maybe we should do stuff physically in the same way, right? And that created like a wave of rural commons, urban commons, all kinds of stuff. And I think part of it went also in Web3 and crypto. And kind of crypto and Web3 is more like a fusion of a libertarian tradition, which is, very pro-market, and I'm kind of assuming some of you are, but also took that digital commons and kind of created this fusion. And I think this is more or less where we are. Okay, so now I'm going to answer your question. So I think every institution has a role, but they need balance, and you need power and counterpowers. And so this is where I think it went wrong. In the 1980s, capital became transnational, and that destroyed the balance we had within the nation states, because we could do politics, right? If people felt that there was too much regulation, you could go to the liberal side and start fighting for more deregulation. If you thought there wasn't enough regulation and the market was, doing too much damage, then you could say we need regulation, right? And so the state, the parliamentary system, was where these fights took place. And actually, if you look at it, it's like 30 years lib and 30 years lab, 30 years lib, 30 years lab. But once you have transnational finance, it no longer works. And so as an old lefty, my vision of the market is it's dynamic. There's a lot of positive sides to the market, but in the present form, it also denies externalities. They just, the more you can push to nature and to other people, the cheaper and more competitive you can be. And it used to be that the state would regulate the market, and now it's just impossible. And I think this is destroying the West. The fact that there is no counterpower to only private interest is, for me, a big problem in the West. It's a rentier capitalism. We make money with IP. Very few people are actually into really productive capacity. Think about real estate, right? I bought a house in 1990. I bought it for 25,000 euro. I sold it 3 years later for 75,000. 10 years later, I came back. It was already 300,000 euro. The same house. Now you can say it's great. People are making money, but it's the same house. It's the same house. It's purely speculative, right? And in the meantime, we don't have factories anymore. Of course, maybe in Brazil it's different, but Europe and US, like we can't even fight anymore. If you watch the stats about the war in Iran, like they only make 50 tomahawks a year in the US, and they spent 400 in the first day of the war, right? So that is no longer working. And I think we don't need a world government, because that would be, hyper centralized. I also think the nation state is no longer the best solution, for a lot of planetary issues. And so I think cosmolocal commons institutions are the ones we should build as a counterpower to purely, transnational capital. So that's kind of the way I see it, So I think the state, may not die, the market will not die, but I think we need a new regulatory system, and where the commons would play a big role. So that's the kind of the way I see it. And in the meantime, I think we will, it's going to be more like the 16th century. So in this, before the nation state became a thing, which is, after the religious civil wars in Europe, the Westphalia Treaty, you had more diversity, right? You had Italian city-states. You had empires, the Habsburg Empire. You had national dynasties in France. You had parliamentary democracy in England already. So you had this huge variety of forms instead of just one form. And the one form we have, especially after World War II, is the nation state, like in a Western mode. And I think this is not going to be tenable. But I also think we don't know exactly what's coming next, right? Because there's going to be struggle, there's going to be experimentation, something is going to fail. And don't forget, most of the people want the nation state back. People like you and me, we might want more digital nomadism and a lot of things, and we are happy doing that. Most people don't have they don't have the digital skills to be able to do that kind of work everywhere in the world, right? They're stuck, and they want protection. And that's why MAGA and the populists are back in fashion, because a lot of people want the nation state back, and we may not like it. And I cannot predict how that struggle is going out, but I don't think that doesn't mean people like you and me are going to disappear, right? Because we many, as there's like 50 million digital nomads, and there is 5 trillion of crypto money floating around. So so I say we, but that's a force, right? So yeah, we don't know exactly how things are going to evolve, but we are a force. And so we shouldn't stop wanting and trying to build the stuff we want to build. And we'll see, we'll see how that goes.
Well, I have some. If you don't have any questions, I have some questions for Michel. Man, first of all, it's a pleasure to hear you speak. Like I was already a huge fan, but hearing from you live, it's awesome. I think you presented us with a set of like really good ideas and a good chain of thought, talking about previous models where the arrangement of market commons and state is more oriented towards the state. So state rules, markets obey, commons are the children of the state, be it more of a theocracy or a monarchy, something like that. And as we emerged from that to more market oriented arrangements where market is king and state tends being something like a puppet of the market, or the market bribes the state machinery to more deregulation or to favor their interests. Everything becomes about capital, and both the property and the commons become commodity of the market state, of this or of the arrangement that is oriented towards the market. I totally agree with that vision. I think that we are seeing some stuff like that. I think that the way money has evolved, it has evolved towards that mean money is now imaginary, money is infinite, so it can be infinitely manipulated towards that kind of objectives. And what hopes of light, beams of hope can we get here? Internet presented us with some, like, well, perhaps there is a way out of that endless loop of let's end up in something like cyberpunk where corporations rule everything. So internet presents in cryptography, and now the emergence of crypto with smart contracts present the commons with a set of tools that they can use to try to arrange themselves without the market counterpart, or this the established private market corporate part of the arrangement, without the state part, which has now become a puppet or a servant of the market. So commons have tools that allows them to try to organize themselves, resist, and perhaps operate apart from the established mechanisms. Let's do our own currencies. Let's do our own markets. Let's do our own set of communications, our own set of rules. In that context, code is law. I think it's good for the commons because commons. Now I want to. Now it's that. That's my question. I was just contextualizing the question. So the idea that commons can organize themselves and resist and detach and depart from the established setup, it's good. But the way I see it, and it's from experience, of course, is that when you try to scale the organization of commons from thousands or from hundreds or dozens to thousands and tens of thousands, commons, they seem to collapse on their own organization. And in your experience, we are now entering a new era of like macroeconomic chaos, geopolitical chaos. People are arguing that World War III is coming. The world order is changing.
I think it has started.
Yes, it started. Yes, of course.
It's already started.
And I think more than ever, we need good setups for commons to defend themselves because their interests are not going to be preserved on the outcome of this scenario. In your experience, what do you see that the commons have today that they must try to work in order to really be able to scale and do not collapse under the complexity of like huge networks of commons?
Okay, so I think now we have two models that already exist. One is the open source model.
Okay.
And in the open source model, you have a productive community, all the people contributing. You have, if it works, after some time, you have all these entrepreneurs that create businesses around. Look at Linux and Red Hat. They can be huge economies. But because the commons is completely demonetized in the core, and because people need to make a living in a capitalist economy, they tend to be maybe not dominated, but under the influence of these, large companies that coalesce around this particular model. And then what they do, most of them, like really 95%, is they create foundations. So in a way, it's the state of the commons. It's where the contributors and the entrepreneurs and everybody else who has some stake, it's like their parliaments where they negotiate, they have conferences, and it works, but it leaves a lot of the commons demonetized, so people can't make a living in the core. You can only make a living if you create commodities on top of but not if you actually working. And so that's where the crypto solved that issue in some fundamental way, right? Because you do a crowdfunding, a distributed crowdfunding, you divide the investment between the investors, the capital side, and the working side, the coders. And then you create quadratic funding and similar, rules in the DAO where you kind of have a parliament as well in a weird way, right? And that has that has advantages compared to the other model, which is that people get paid. More people get paid. So it solves like the economic issue. But if you look at what crypto does, it is not connected with the physical world. And actually, even open source, you could say the same. And so my analysis is, as long as we don't do that, we will remain marginal. We have our niche, and some people are doing well in that niche, and it's growing, and it's very innovative and creating new types of institution and practice. All that is good, but we're kind of at some level we're parasite is not the right word, but you know what I mean. Like we're relying on all the other stuff that exists in the physical world, and then we do our, we're in the noosphere. We produce code and we produce knowledge and stuff like that, right? And so I think that has to change. So what crypto has invented is a global way to coordinate human labor and capital. And that's great, but not in physical production. And so that's why I talk about the archipelago of regenerative projects. So I do not think humanity today has invented a system which is able to live in balance with nature in the long term. We are in overshoot. We are, we have biodiversity crisis. We have climate disruption. We have many things that we see. The insect population is collapsing, and then of course we see geopolitical chaos coming. So you cannot say that this system is working very well. I'm sorry. I know there's still people saying, no, it's not really working that well in my view. And so we need to create a type of civilization where extraction and regeneration are in balance, and they're not right now. And so the strategy of archipelago of regenerative project is that I think that Web3 should connect, and vice versa, with all the people who are already in exit. And there's a lot more people than you think. For example, the number of eco-villages in France went up from 150 to 1,500 in just 10 years. So a lot of people are leaving the cities. We are at the end of the Roman Empire. Like in the US, there are people, I think they're called needs or something. There's 8 million people that they cannot find. They don't know where they are. They are not working. They're not unemployed. We don't know where they live, but we know that they're alive. And I know where these people are. They are in Mount Shasta. They are in near Asheville. They've left the system. That's what happened. There's a lot of people who left the system, but of course they're poor. They don't make money. It's very hard. I don't know if you read this, but the founder of traditional dream factory in Portugal. He just wrote a long article about.
We interviewed him in the last season.
Yeah, Samuel Delesque. And man, how hard it is to do that stuff. We really like the pioneering monks, in the very beginning. But this is what needs to be done. There's no other way. We need to make, those efforts viable. And right now, you have to be extremely idealistic. And he has cancer, and like when you read the article, there's only one conclusion: is has the cancer because he gave too much. It was just because they had a lot of the weather, and then flooding here and flooding there, and if you work 3 months to make something and then the next day everything is gone, it's very hard psychologically, right? And with not enough people. But otherwise, like an amazing project, with physical aspects and very innovative use of crypto, proof of presence, and then they have this software called Closer. I mean, I haven't been there, but at least from the outside, it looks like the kind of thing we actually need to do. And I think we need an alliance between some of the money within crypto that realizes that they need to sustain this, because it's going to be a guarantee for human survival. And some of these people here who, some of them are greens and they hate tech and they have prejudices and against crypto. So it's not going to be easy, but I think it needs to, this is the thing that's going to, and so I like the Brazilian project. I don't know how good they are. What's his name? Tools of the Commons. I like the idea. It's like you create a virtual identity for a group of projects that can then operate to do fundraising, and so there is more and more network nations, right? Which I think is interesting as well, because it's also a spiritual thing, right? We are people. We need more than just like make money and so the archipelago idea, and I'll stop with this, is the idea that, okay, if you have a local project, you can still relate, to the mayor and the governor and whatever exists, because, you have a physical body, you exist in a territory, but you can also appeal cosmolocally, right? We can start organizing in a different way as well. And we can do both at the same time. So it's like a 3-level thing: hyper local, we seek autonomy where we are and to be as free as we can. Bioregional, solidarity and complementarity with other people doing different stuff, but with the same goal. And then cosmolocal is all the people doing the same thing in the world, learning from each other in real time, all the time, and to have hyper innovation. So for me, that's like the winning formula. But we're not there yet. But this is, I think, what we need to do.
I have a question as well that I think that's a follow-up. Is last week we had Jackson here, the director of Network School, and Jean is organizing Ipêcast, a pop-up city. I was there last year. We are going to be there this year as well. But how do you think that these communities, these Web3 crypto tech communities that are forming like network societies, how do you think that this cosmolocalism can be applied there? Because I think that I was there, I spent January at Network School, but I think that many things could be done locally and they are not. So what do you think that these new startup societies should start doing to adapt to this cosmolocalist view?
Yeah, so this is, I think, where there's a bit of difference in polarity and maybe even tension between visions, because I think that a network state vision is a mercantilist vision. It's like the Dutch Republic of the 16th century, the Hanseatic League. So this is the merchants that are in charge, and they buy or negotiate for land, and they buy food, but then they're not organizing their own production, right? And they assume that this is going to work. But think 1 minute about what's happening in Dubai, right? So like 8 million people, but it's a totally artificial situation. Like they don't have food, 90% import of food. They don't have water. They need desalination, and it's extremely expensive to do desalination. And the only reason they can do it is because they have oil, right? Now Iran has started sending drones to the oil fields, and you cannot defend. You cannot defend an oil field from that. It's too complicated, because you have a $4 million missile, and you have $320,000 drones. Like, it's at this stage we can't, and they haven't touched the desalination plan yet, right? But if they would choose to attack the desalination plants, like, Dubai is done. So this is why I'm saying that you should be related to people who make food, who do renewable energy, who do all kinds of things that you actually need, right? But it doesn't have to be purely geographic, right? You can have a network community that is related to 10 different eco-villages, and they don't need to be together in the same place. So we can think in terms of translocal geography, but we do need to think that level. And I think that's what people like Balaji are not doing. They're not thinking about. They just think they can buy everything. But depending how bad stuff gets, after the Roman Empire, there was no money at all, right? So Bitcoin is great as long as Bitcoin is accepted. And maybe it will, maybe it will forever, but so we have to also start in terms of risk and de-risking and resilience and anti-fragility. And because I hope that you see that, guys, how fast things are going south, right? Things can go south very fast. It's non-linear. It's not like we went up and then we go slowly down. No, this is not how it happens. It happens to crisis, and maybe China and Russia will decide, well, we got to do something, because we're gonna, China needs 40% oil, and now they're not fighting. But what if they really, really are in trouble, and they have no oil coming from the Middle East? And I don't want to sound too apocalyptic either, but it's just that we don't know. But we know that we're going through a change in history. We're in a downward slope for the moment, and of course, there's always light at the tunnel. And I believe we should look at the light at the tunnel. But it's not like a smooth line. It's not gonna. Transitions are not easy, and of course, it could be different, but I don't think so. I see no signs that this transition will be easier than, let's say, the end of the Roman Empire or the religious Reformation civil wars, in the 16th century Europe. No, this is on a similar level, with very destructive weapons on top of it.
Michel, really, really good insights. I think you are. I do not think you are being apocalyptic. I think you are being realistic. I also find sometimes that not any specifics, but overall in the network state movement, sometimes people to me sound too optimistic. They sound too utopic, or they also rely a lot on money to put the pieces together. And at the end, in the end, money is only an instrument for social coordination.
I always say it's a representation of value. It's not the value itself.
Yes.
The value is the people, the stuff, the work. That's the value. And all monies, not just Bitcoin, every money is a representation and a mobilization of real value, but it's not the value itself. And you cannot forget that. It's like of course, as long as it functions, as long as people accept its representation, it's valuable.
But if it breaks, then if the money stops and the coordination breaks, then the coordination was artificial. And as you said, we should coordinate based on like natural resources and limitations and the way the world really functions. And money could facilitate natural coordination. But if we are only able to coordinate if we have artificial numbers on digital balances, telling the flow of private capital, then this coordination is not sustainable. It's artificial, it's fragile. And if the world order breaks and like SWIFT payments break and dollar systems break, then all the hell breaks loose. And I also think that if we talk about commons initiatives and like let's think about new forms of civilizatory infrastructures, we really should be able to tackle ideas that go beyond that. No?
Yeah. And by the way, I want to say, and I stopped following it, but when I saw your thing,
Valocracy, yes.
Yeah. So I thought, wow, this is going in the direction of contributory value, right? And this is what I think needs to happen. So, before the 16th century, value was land. You had land and farmers working on the land, and they were giving you, their percentage. And so people believed, and in that context, rightly, that value came from the land, right? And then in the 7th century, there was a whole discussion, and they settled on first labor. If you have workers who can work in the factory, you can make the products, you can sell them, and then of course that became more like factors of production. But anyway, so and value became commodified, right? So we are an extractive economy, so we need to extract, create something scarce that's marketable, because if you don't have tension between supply and demand, there's no value in our system. So you need to extract, make it scarce, sell it at a price, and then we tax it and we redistribute it through the state. That's what we settled on for 4 centuries. But by doing that, we ignored externalities, right? We're depleting the soil, no matter. We're poisoning the water, no matter. We'll just move around, and because it's global, we always find new things. And I think that is ending. The world is full. There's not so much, to continue forever like this. And so I think we are moving to contribution, and I think we already see it both in open source and in crypto. It's based on contribution, and you still have market, but they coexist with each other, right? So in the commons economy, which I think we already in it in some sectors. So what does IBM and Red Hat depend on? On the contributions of all the people who do Linux. And then they create market value around it. But their market value is codependent on the success of the contributory mechanism, right? Same with crypto. Like if you talk about proof of presence, that means Samuel recognizes contributions. If you're there physically, this defined as a contribution. It's not labor as a commodity anymore. It's based on, and so this is the new value scheme. The commons economy is going to be a contributory economy, and I think, I don't know how well you did it or how well is it going, and if you have everything right or not. But what I liked when I was looking at your stuff 2-3 years ago was, okay, here's a guy who's working on it. He's got it, right? You've seen some of the light, and you went in that direction, and this is good. And many people are doing it now, but it's fragmented. But many people are doing it. So I think there is an increased awareness that this is the way to go. And then impact is like negative contribution, right?
Yeah.
Like if you poison, and so now more and more you have schemes that are being proposed and worked on. I met a guy called Joseph Potvin, forgot the name of it, but he has a whole system where, with sensors and satellites to determine the health of a bioregion. And his proposal is, if you are contributing, if your bioregion is getting healthier, you can create wealth. But if you're impoverishing it, like the soil is going down and everything, then you can make less money, right? So they turn the value system around. Now, of course, that is not accepted yet in most places. But I think a lot of crypto and a lot of open source communities, even if not fully, they have started recognizing that this is a thing, that they need to reward contributions. Like if you look at public good funding in crypto, what else is that? Then contributory funding, drip funding and all of that stuff. That's recognizing that contributions need to be rewarded and stimulated, right? It's an inverse logic from what we had. And it's not state socialism. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the commons and finding the right adaptations between the public, the private, and the common. And there's maybe not one solution to that. Maybe we'll have fights about how to do that, right?
Yeah, that's, I think, how the network state movement fits in that vision. And what I like of Balazs's idea is, I think, two things mainly. One thing, which is the most important for me, is the urgency. So we've been talking about these topics in academics and several areas, environments, for like forever.
Yeah.
And for the first time, he looked to this topic and said, I don't have all the answers, but it's time to build. It's time to experiment in the real life. No matter what, the old global era is ending, or order, and we need experimentation. So I think the main idea is, like, I don't know how to do it, but if we use the concept of startups, which is start small scale, in an empty space, don't hurt anyone, voluntarism, bring people that are aligned with your ideas, and experiment in small scale, and if it works, you grow and export that idea, it's a good thing. So I think these small ideas and values of voluntarism, opt-in, the right to exit, and these kind of things are good to reach that answer. So we are, and that's actually what happened. So we have several projects that was catalyzed or accelerated by the book that are completely different. So Zuzalu and Edge City and communities and right wing, left wing. So there's a plurality of options that we are seeing to evolve. And this is amazing.
And that is great and much healthier than the old, left, right.
Oh, definitely.
Because that's that is what is destroying our society right now, right? You have these two tribes, and they hate each other and they want to eliminate each other. And so I was canceled in 2018. So and it was very painful and very traumatic, and I lost everything. So I'm not going to go in details this time. But then when I went to Zuzalu, I was invited by the Network Nations workshop. And I was sitting on a table with a climate denier, an impact investor, and a collapsist. And they were talking in a friendly way. And I thought, how long is it that I haven't experienced this? Like that people can be different politically and yet still dialogue. And so immediately what came up is it's because they share a commons. They're building an infrastructure that's good for all of them. So they can put that between brackets and focus on their collective construction, right? And that's why the commons is healthy and why the network state is healthy and the network nations is healthy. And as far I'm not libertarian, and I have some objections with the idea of a corporate state, like not to be a citizen but a shareholder. I find that morally hard to accept, but that's me. But if you're there out of your own free will, experimenting, go for it. Who knows where the answer is, right? And so I hope for all kinds of experimentations, and that we talk with each other, that we learn from each other, and that we don't do what the others are doing, which is trying to exterminate each other. So I think that's why I actually kind of switched also to Web3 after Zuzaru, because I thought, wow, yeah, this is the right spirit. This is how we need to work together. Not judge each other exclusively on whether we're right or wrong on some political scale. But we're all human beings. We're all trying to solve our problems and maybe do something for the world. And let's proceed from there.
That's absolutely true. I think when we don't have a frontier, that's the problem. Because you are fighting for a just small piece of wealth and
scarcity.
Exactly.
So we have created our own frontier, right? Like a virtual frontier, but it's real.
Exactly. Yeah. We have actually two new frontiers. One is like the cyberspace, the blockchains in the internet, and the other one is a legal frontier, which is this small special zones, charter cities, and these private public partnerships that China invented, actually. that's so China invented that. So let's experiment with these economic, these market-based cities and see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's a kind of a part that China was the one to create 650 special economic zones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we are heading to the end, but I want to hear from you about AI. So last year we finally reached that promise period of singularity and the exponential growth, and we are seeing like crazy things every day, basically. And I want to understand how your ideas changed or evolved with this new reality, and how do you see AI helping in that transition?
Yeah. So I tend to be less excited than most people about AI, and I cannot explain it. But it's probably because in the late 90s, I already did a lot of research on transhumanism. I did a documentary called Technocalypse that's still on YouTube, has like millions of views. And it's 3 parts. What is transhumanism? What are its consequences? And what is its spiritual background? And so I don't believe either that AI will solve everything and put everybody unemployed, but I also don't believe it's going to be the solution to everything. It's like it's going to be a process, and it's like self-driving cars. I can assure you that when I heard everybody going crazy about self-driving cars, I just knew this could not happen the way they thought, because you have to change the cities. Like all the rules have to change. You can't just. So anyway, we have to take AI and really look, how it's evolving, what it's doing, and it's complex. And so I don't have this sense of like in 2 years, like we're gonna be dead. I don't have that. I think it's, it's part of the transition, and It's on the same level as the war in Iran, and it's one of the huge things for sure. But it's like I'm kind of not totally obsessed with it. But I think so. First of all, in terms of knowledge, right? The internet has exploded our knowledge. We went from a scarcity of knowledge to a super overabundance of knowledge and scarcity of attention. It in a way it made us sick. We can't just deal with. And so I see AI first of all as a perpetual synthesizing machine. It was called into being by the internet in a way, to solve the problem of that permanent overabundance of knowledge. We now have a permanent synthesizing machine. And I also think it's going to be the intermediary between the human and complex nature. Because so there is a Chinese futurist from Singapore, Chor Parn, The Cutting Floor on Substack, and he talks about type 1 civilization. So type 1 civilization is civilization that has extractivism and regeneration in balance. Now, to do that, it's going to be complicated because, we have a highly complex society with so many products. And so I think that the management of the resources, the making visible of non-human life to the human, because we can't just damage the web of life the way we're doing now. This is going to require AI. So AI is going to give us the options. Like, what do we do with copper? What do we do with this, with rare earth? And if we don't want to go to war, right, between, let's say, China and the US around rare earth, we will need very complex systems, global thresholds and allocations that tell us how much there is, how much is growing, how much the productivity is moving forward, but also like the negative, like what is the negative threshold? Because, for example, we know that under a certain level of copper, people start stealing the copper. Like they literally steal the copper from the railways. And so we don't want to go under that threshold. So how do we do that? Well, we have to make agreements, but the whole monitoring and scenarios and calculations, that's the role of AI. So that's how I see AI. Not as the master, but as the making the complexity manageable.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we go that way.
Yeah.
I really hope we go that way.
I think probably, if you look at humanity, we fuck things up first. And it's just the way it goes. Because we're selfish. And, yeah.
Yes, AI could provide some like guardrails. Like we want to, we as a society, we want to go there, but please do help us to not fuck everything up. So
Yeah.
AI should not tell us what to do, but should help us get where we see that we should be
and
going.
that's not what we're doing. In Israel, they were using AI, the GoDaddy program, right? They were waiting for the daddy to come home, and then they would bomb the house and the whole family, right? And they use AI to find out when the father was coming home. Yeah, I'm not pinpointing one people here because this can happen in many other places where where human cruelty exists. But just saying that's what we're using AI for, right? And the Americans just used it to wipe out the leadership in Iran. They use AI for that. Yeah,
that's why I'm really pro open source AI and decentralization.
Because
and
they're listening to everyone, and the moment they want to destroy you, they ask Palantir, or maybe that guy watches certain kinds of porn. It can be used in so many bad ways, and it will. And it's probably after a few pedagogical catastrophes and then you get people like really revolting. And this. So after World War One, the crime rate went down by a factor of 100. Right. So basically, what happens is, people want to go to war at some point. They're frustrated, they're angry, they want to destroy the others. And so, when the war starts, everybody's enthusiastic, patriotism and the propaganda, and we want all the Germans dead and all the French dead, or whatever, the thing is. After 4 years, like, never again, right? And that's when you have sorry to say, but that's when we have great progress. Like, never again, and then suddenly, yeah, life changes for the better for a few generations. Normally 4 generations before we forget why we did the good stuff. And I think this is where we are. We had a very long peace, at least in the West, and there's too many people who want conflict, because they've forgotten the cost of conflict.
Yeah.
And in that context, how could I criticize the network states? You're not killing anybody.
Oh my God! Yes,
You're trying to do the good as you see it, with people who agree to do it with you. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and I think tech has a technology, digital technology in general. They have a more collaborative nature. So the internet and Wikipedia and so even companies, startups, like in crypto, you see like there is Solana and Ethereum, they are fight each other, but there is tokens flowing between the chains, and so it's more like collaborative, more creative.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
While the state and these monopolized institutions, they tend to be more violently and less creative. So they try to enforce things and taxation and these kind of things. It's more violent.
There's a high trust level. There's a high trust level in general, I think. Despite all the bad stuff that's also happening. But actually, when people are together, I see a very high trust level.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I think is a sign of moral development.
Yeah.
Because, if you can trust other people, you have to trust yourself, right? If I think that I can trust you, I must also have a high opinion of myself, because I have to believe it's possible to be like you, because I am or want to be like that as well, right? If I think that everybody is out to get me, I will try to get people as well, right? Because you think that's the rule of the game. So I think that one of the other reasons I like Web3 is I went to a small seminar with the Zoo Garden in Thai Island, and every time somebody came to join them, they would have like a ritual to say welcome. Every time somebody left, they would have a ritual to say goodbye. I thought, wow, what a high level of intersubjectivity, of how people relate and care to each other. It's not so easy to find outside of Web3, I think.
Yeah, so many things to discuss, and unfortunately we are running out of time. We would love to have your talk even remotely on during Ipêcast. I'll put some links here.
Pleasure.
So if you are interested to learn more about the foundation, I don't know if you want to share your Substack here as well.
Yes, it's Forged Civilization Substack. Do you have a chat? You have a chat here?
Yes.
Do you have the address?
I found it here. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I will put here.
The
So
last
people
one,
can-
the last one is an article about my trip to China, and so I visited. Yeah, I visited 9 grassroots communities in China. And there's also a very interesting article you can find, which is about Wamotopia, which was a civilizational AI festival that took place here in Chiang Mai. With 20 Chinese communities who came to Chiang Mai, self-organized, each separately, half in English, half in Chinese. Unfortunately, now there's a lot of smoke here. It's don't come from March to May. But otherwise, it's a great place to live.
Great. And I will put here also IP Village link. So if you want to learn more, and you can also join the Telegram or Discord and ask questions and get involved with. But that's it, guys. It's a shame that you're running out of time. That was a pleasure. Conversations, always great insights, and I hope you have learned something. Guys, thanks for joining us as well. Last words.
Do I say Jean or Jean, or how do we
Jean.
pronounce your name?
Jean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jean Casta, and I forgot the third one.
Andrea.
Okay. Thanks to you all, guys, and let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Michel. Bye-bye, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.